I apologise. Moana.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I cannot believe we've had so many 10-minute speeches from members of the government. They clearly don't understand what the plan is either, because not a single one of them has articulated in their speech. To the member Cam Calder who spoke recently, I would just say, put down the thesaurus. Back away from the thesaurus. Can I say to members of the National Party, I think you need to stage an intervention, get Parliamentary Services to remove the thesaurus function from Microsoft Word, and I think that his speeches will be all the better for it. I'm not going to say anything mean about Shane Ardern, because I actually respect that member. It's a shame that he's undervalued in his own caucus. He should be doing a lot more. He knows a lot more about agriculture than David Carter does, and it's a real shame that he's not given the respect he deserves by his own colleagues in his own caucus. Mr. Speaker, all I want to say is, where is the plan? And I want the next National Party Speaker to tell us what the plan is. Because by listening to the National Party, apparently the only problem we have in New Zealand is that we don't charge people enough for food. The biggest problem we have is we don't charge people enough for food, we don't charge people enough for services, we don't charge them enough for rates, we don't charge them enough for food and clothes for their children. Because the only answer this government has to what's going on in our economy is to put up GST. To increase GST 20%, a 20% increase in GST. And I want to say to the National Party members, wake up, because you may still be partying on the top floor, but people are suffering in this country. Now, I was out at the protest earlier this afternoon for the cleaners who clean this building. How many National MPs bothered to turn up to support the cleaners who clean the Beehive and who clean the Parliament buildings? Not a single one. Not a single one. And they've all got excuses why they couldn't be there. Well, we met the woman who cleans John Key's office. $12.55 an hour. $12.55 an hour. Bill English thinks that the person who cleans his house should get $20 an hour. Well, I say that the cleaners who clean this place, we should lead by example, and they should not be getting $12.55 an hour. And National MPs, if they disagree with that, should have had the guts to turn up and to tell those workers why they don't believe that they should get more than that for cleaning these parliamentary buildings. Well, the Labour Party and the Green Party members who are out there support those workers, and we're proud to do so. Now, it was interesting today that the Prime Minister John Key said last year there'd been a small contraction in jobs. A small contraction in jobs. And we shouldn't be concerned, because we're still below the OECD average when it comes to unemployment. Well, that's pretty cold comfort to all those New Zealanders who lost their jobs last year, who are continuing to lose their jobs this year, 168,000 New Zealanders, because our government has no plan. Over the ditch, in Australia, across the Tasman, well, they put billions and billions of dollars into their economic stimulus package to deal with the recession. And guess what's happened to their unemployment? It's stopped rising and now it's going down. Well, the national government just thinks that's a coincidence. They're just lucky, maybe, that that's the case. The fact is our government has absolutely no plan for jobs, and that has been reiterated by every single National Party MP who stood up and has been unable to say what they're doing in this area. You know what Tim McIndoe said yesterday? He said, we just need to instil a work ethic. We just need to instill a work ethic. Well, maybe Tim McIndoe should have gone and talked to those 3,500 New Zealanders who queued up for 150 supermarket jobs if he thinks that Kiwis don't have a work ethic and they don't want to work. The fact is, the jobs are not there and our government doesn't care. Because our government's answer to people who don't have jobs, and Nikki Wagner can sneer at me because she doesn't like what I'm saying and she shouldn't like it because it's terrible and she should be ashamed, is that they're going to whack an increase in GST on top of the people that they're doing nothing to get into work. That's the National Party's answer. And if that's not what they're doing, and if they want to let us in on this great secret plan they've got where apparently it's going to be revenue neutral, they're going to keep the same amount of revenue, but everyone's going to be a winner. Some people are going to pay less tax, no one's going to pay more tax, but everyone's going to win. Well, we'll be very interested. Nikki Wagner says yes. That's the plan. Well, I think that what's happened is the National Party wants to use national standards to dumb down numeracy in this country so that people will buy that economic argument. Because And if we talk about national standards, and I really want to mention this because every single national MP who's got up and defended those standards has said that their schools and their electorates currently do not provide information to parents on how well their kids are doing. Katrina Shank said it outright. Katrina Shank said that her school that her kids go to doesn't do a good job in telling her how her kids are doing. Nikki Kay said that none of her schools in Auckland Central, and I can't wait for Jacinda Ardern to go around and visit those schools and tell them that she said none of them do a good enough job at telling parents how their kids are doing. They're all doing a lousy job. That's what the National Party say. They're all doing a lousy job. Well, we look forward to going around to all our schools and making it clear that National MPs think their schools are doing a lousy job, because that's what they've been saying. But I want to talk about housing. I'm so pleased the Minister of Housing is in the House for my speech. I know he got pre-warning. He came down because he's looking for some more policy ideas because he's run out, and he's hoping I might give him some ideas in my speech. But I'm not going to do that, because I think he needs to learn to stand on his own 2 feet. He's run out of Labour Party legislation to pass now. He's going to have to do a little bit of thinking. Overall, I think it's going to be character building for Mr Heatley, and I'm all about being here to support him. So I'm not going to give him some more Labour Party ideas to pass into National Party policy. But I thought it was very, very interesting that the Prime Minister specifically mentioned the Residential Tenancies Amendment Bill in his speech. And I've started to think that the only reason they've been putting off this legislation and putting off passing it is so that they can still talk about the fact that they're doing something. Because there is no reason why that legislation should not have been passed before Christmas. It's Labour legislation. We support it. Minister Heatley took it on. He made it a little bit worse, but it's still better than the status quo. The fact is, over Christmas, we had stories of boarding house tenants and over the Sevens in Wellington who were being asked to move out, and they didn't have the protection of the residential tenancy law. Now, if Minister Heatley had passed that legislation before Christmas, reported back from Select Committee in September, that could not have happened. And I think this minister needs to explain where that bill's gone, why he hasn't passed it, and why he is refusing to give vulnerable boarding house tenants the full protection of the law. Now, what has Minister Heatley done in his first 15 months in government? He sold one state house to a tenant. He passed an options and advice service which has done nothing except keep people off a waiting list, and he refuses to put them... Yeah, that's right, because they don't get a needs assessment, Minister. They get kicked out of the Housing New Zealand office and they end up in emergency accommodation. And I'm pleased you've admitted that all this has done is keep people off the waiting list so that you can claim they haven't gone up. The fact is, if every person had a needs assessment, they could have options and advice service for those who are C and D category who are unlikely to get a house in the short term. But we have people who would have been A and B category turning up in emergency accommodation because they've been turned away by the government's option and advice service from a state house that they would have qualified for. And the minister should know this, and the fact he's laughing is a little bit of a worry actually, because these are our most vulnerable families that the minister doesn't seem to care about. But what's very telling is the minister barely talked about housing in his speech. Oh, here we go.
Point of order. The Honourable Phil Heatley.
I seek leave to table a statement in the House from the Honourable Ruth Dyson that says that the C&D applicants will never be housed under a Labor government.
Can I just say to the member, the convention of this House is that where members wish to seek leave, it is done at the end of a member's speech. To do it during a member's speech is disorderly and interrupts the member's flow of the speech, and that's not a standing order, it's just the power of this House. I'd ask the member to respect that. And I'm not going to take the leave at this point, but if the member wants to move it at the end of this member's speech, I'll certainly entertain it at that point.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Speaker. Well, he's just upped his work rate for the year anyway with that point of order, so I'm pleased we were able to help out in that respect. And Minister Heatley in his speech, after we heckled him enough that he actually started talking about housing and vaguely kind of mentioned it in passing, he said this: he wants to achieve even more this year than he did last year. Minister, I think it would be physically impossible for you to do less this year than you did last year. That is a very, very low bar to reach. I also want to briefly mention RS&T, because this is an area that obviously I'm very passionate about as well. And I think that this government has a gall to stand up in this House and claim that they care about science and they care about innovation after they slashed the budget last year. Slashed the budget last year for science and for research and development. And they may be Johnny-come-latelys to this whole science and innovation thing, but it's going to take more than words to have a step change in this country. And I do not believe that this government